How are you?
Yeah, not too bad.
Have you
Thank you.
started recording?
Please. Sorry, say again.
Sorry, Noor, have you started recording?
Yes, yes.
Can we start now?
Okay, we're live.
We start?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us for our seminar today about research and paper writing. It is our pleasure really to have Professor Ralph Henkel with us, and also Dr. Sahrab Abdul Rasool, Dr. Patricia Cox, and Dr. Muhammad Aziz, who will give us presentation about essentials in research, literature reviews, and successful publication, which we think is a very good subject that all of us as doctors and other health professionals need to know about it. I would like first to introduce Dr. Jasmine Azzawi, نقيب الأطباء العراقيين, to present himself and to talk about the نقابة الأطباء. دكتور جاسم، شرفنا حضورك اليوم. إذا ممكن نبتدي معك، الميكروفون لك الآن. Noor, could you check if Dr. Jassim is...
He's in mute.
الو
الو نعم نسمعك دكتور.
الو السلام عليكم عزيزي دكتور رافد.
عليكم السلام.
شكرا جزيلا. حقيقة سعادة كبرى أن نلتقي بكم وأن نشاهدكم ونتحدث معاكم ونحاول أن نتبادل الصور والآراء والكلام. أنتم أعزاء إلى قلوبنا وفضلكم كبير، وعلاقتنا حقيقة هي صميمية، وإحنا نطمع إن شاء الله أو نطمح إلى علاقة أقوى مع your association and our association in order to promote our activities and to join more than only talks. يعني ونتمنى من كل قلوبنا أنه نكون وحدة واحدة ونكون يد واحدة في سبيل خدمة البلد وخدمة العلم، وليس العراق فقط وإنما كل العالم. أنا سعيد بك وبنشاطك وبجمعيتكم، وسعيد بإخواني وأخواتي اللي يعني معي بالوقت الحاضر عبر الأثير، ويعني نأمل أنه نستمر بهكذا فعاليات في سبيل خدمة شعبنا وفي سبيل خدمة ناسنا. إن شاء الله الأيام القادمة راح تشهد علاقة أقوى وموثقة ومدونة وعلاقة صميمية بين منظمتنا كنقابة وبين منظمتكم كجمعية. حبيبي أشكرك مرة ثانية، وسلامي كل الأخوان والأخوات الموجودين. شكرا جزيلا حبيبي.
شكرا لك يا أخي العزيز أستاذ دكتور جاسم العزاوي، نقيب أطباء العراق، وشكرا شرفتنا بحضورك. نعم نطمح إلى تعاون أكثر، وأكيد يعني مثل ما طرحت جنابكم أنه راح نشتغل أكثر إن شاء الله كجمعية ونقابة. النقابة هي طبعا هي تعتبر المظلة الكبيرة لكل الأطباء العراقيين، والجمعية أيضا تدعم هذا النقابة وتدعم عملها، وإحنا إن شاء الله نتعاون معا بما في خدمة المجتمع الطبي العراقي والعالمي أيضا، وما في خدمة العلم أيضا. شكرا جزيلا. أشكر الحضور جميعا. وصلنا احنا الحد الأقصى اللي حجزناه على الزوم هو 500 شخص، لكن احنا عندنا لايف ستريم. we have live stream on the Facebook on the United Iraqi Medical Association page on the Facebook. So please, if you have any friends or anyone would like to join us, they couldn't because already we have reached the maximum number that we can take, which is 500, and we already reached that. Please advise them that they can also continue seeing the lectures through the Facebook at our United Iraqi Medical Association page. Once again, thank you all very much indeed, and thanks for our speakers. And now before I start, please, we will put the link to the feedback form. And it is, as always, I say, it is very vital for us to listen to you, to look at whatever feedback you give us to improve our service and our standards. And at the same time, it is good also for our speakers. We provide them with the feedback from you. Please make sure that you put your name as you wanted in the certificate, and with your email, and make sure it is the correct email so you can receive the certificate. Once again, thank you all very much indeed. And the microphone now to Dr. Mohammed Aziz, who is a consultant Ops at Gynae in London, who will chair the meeting of today. Thank you very much indeed, Mohammed. It is the mic is now. Thank you.
Thank you, Rafid. Thank you. Welcome everybody in this activity of UIMA research webinar. Now, we know that UIMA is an active society in medical teaching and education. And basically, the unique thing about UIMA is that we listen and take actively the suggestions from our colleagues back home, and we respond to that promptly to make sure that they achieve their educational needs. Now, an example of that is this webinar, which was a suggestion by our colleague Sahrab and executed by our UIMA Executive Committee. Research is very important these days. Actually, interestingly, that the first research ever was from Mesopotamia, which is Iraq now. It was from city of Babylon, the king Nebuchadnezzar, who divided some people in two groups, one to eat meat and wine, and the other group to eat vegetables and water. And he checked their performance after a period of time and find that people who eat vegetables are more healthy. And he applied this in his community. And then it was published in brackets in Book of Daniel. This is part of the Bible. Shockingly or disappointingly, Iraq now is the bottom list of countries that support researchers. There are many reasons for that. Our aim at UIMA to provide our colleagues with the best way to make sure that their research is successful and they can publish their researches with the help of this webinar. Now, we are lucky to have three distinguished guests today. The guest speaker, Prof. Henkel, who will talk about the publications, and our experienced colleague, Dr. Sahrab Rasool, will talk about literature review, and our junior trainee, Dr. Patricia Cox, who will talk about a methodology of research. Now, I hand over the mic to Dr. Sahrab Rasool to introduce our first speaker. Sahrab, the mic is yours, please.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I have the pleasure to present the first presenter, who is my previous HOD, head of department, and he joined Logix Pharma as a chief scientific advisor in July 2020. So he is, after following a very esteemed pathway in academic science, Prof. Henkel has studied biology and chemistry in Marburg, Germany. From 2014 to May 2020, he was the head of Department of Medical Biosciences at the University of Western Cape in South Africa, and that is my current university. And he is now an extraordinary professor at this same university. Prof. Henkel is a visiting reader in the Department of Metabolism, Digestion and Reproduction at the Imperial College of London, and he is an honorary professor at Universidad Peruana Cayetano Heredia, and I hope I read the name right, in Lima, Peru, and he is an adjunct senior scientist at the American Center for Reproduction at Cleveland Clinic in Ohio. He is the editor-in-chief of Androgia, and he has graduated 71 postgraduate students with 167 publications, 2 books, 74 book chapters, and an H index of 41. I think Prof. Hinkle can start with his lecture now, and he will lead the talk.
Yeah, good evening from London. And first of all, thank you very much to the organizers to invite me to this event this evening. Just come with this. Publishing, can you see my presentation now?
Yes.
Fine.
Okay, perfect. Publishing as a scientist or medical researcher is basically a must. And we need to follow certain rules to get these papers published, to get it out in the world. And I want to talk a bit about publishing, how to actually create and get good ways to get the research published. Yeah. The perceived job of a scientist is, yeah, we do some research, we have some students, help people, and if it's clinicians, when we treat patients, and then it's community engagement, and of course, many people think, yeah, being famous. And this is what people think in general. Yeah, there's a scientist somewhere in the corner of his lab and doing something. This is something of a past long time ago. The true job profile of a scientist nowadays is have lots of students, have high teaching loads, marking lots of scripts, work overtime, and of course, do the research. This is what it is about. That includes traveling, give lectures, and publishing. And this is what I want to talk about tonight. And this should not be this way here, enforcing the publish or perish rule, but one can do it in a different way. But essentially, if you as a scientist, if you don't publish, you are out of the game. And this should not be like this. So it should actually start right from the beginning when students are working already. Somebody is now here drawing in my presentation. I don't know what is going on there now. And that there's 2 different opinions now. The student's opinion that, oh no, my God, it is unfair, this is additional work and it is getting to somebody who I don't even know, who must then judge it. On the other hand, as a faculty, we think that must be published and the student must comply to be trained. But the students want just the marks and the certificate and then go along. But in the end, they also want to become researchers and they have to be trained accordingly. And this, as a publication, that should not be some, whoops, what is going on now? Oh, wait. There's something missing now.
Yeah. Can you try to share the screen again, please? I think there's some error with the system.
I just started. Somebody deleted here something because the title is gone now. Okay.
Can you share the screen again, please? Because we cannot see the screen.
Okay. Screen share. Can you see?
Yes, we can, sir. Now, yeah, thanks a lot.
Okay. And that should not be some kind of publication in inverted commas, like here in this cartoon in the newspaper of a chess club. It must have really substance. So like I said earlier, the training starts with young scientists. And they have and should follow certain rules, because to become a good scientist, you need to be resilient. You need to be, you have humility. You need to read a lot, because you need to be on the top of the game. You need to be versatile. You need to engage intellectually with leaders in the field, because this is the only way how you can grow yourself. And stay optimistic. And last but not least, and very important is this part, you must have fun. Because only if you are enjoying the work, then you will get the ideas that are necessary and to do and cope with the hard work. Coming to the first part, resilience. Science is not something for the faint-hearted, because it is really extremely challenging, it is extremely competitive, and it is also with many disappointments. And my doctoral supervisor always told me, Henkel, the most important feature of a good scientist is a high tolerance for frustration. And that time I thought he's just talking something, but now I know he was right, because not all the experiments are working. Not everything is working. Not all the publications are accepted. They are rejected. And we come to this at a later stage. There are lots of disappointments. There's even then broadsides from the so-called top scientists in the world. If you're there at a conference and you are not 100% prepared, they can nail you. And I have seen it with my own eyes. So there's a fire from these flagships of science. Science, in the end, it must be addictive to overcome all these disappointments and all the frustration. So the important, what I said, important feature of a good scientist is a high tolerance of frustration. Humility. We must be humble. We should that should be an essential attribute of an effective researcher, because only if you are humble and come down to the ground and understand what is going on, you will be creative, because science is something to create new knowledge. And as a scientist, we must then be a wellspring of new ideas for students and collaborators. Most of these ideas will be proven wrong. That is what we have to deal with, but we need to go on. And we, of course, we must also be self-critical. And to be on the level where we want to be and have to be, we must read, 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 and read again. Only this is the way how to gain the basic information and to gain the knowledge to create the quality of the science that is required. We need the insight that is achieved by juxtapositioning of different pieces of information to create something new. So we must be able to find connections between one piece here and another piece there, and then link them up, and not just sitting there in silos here or in another silo way. We must find these connections, and only then we will move on and be good scientists. Therefore, we must read whatever we can read and get these connections. We must assimilating all this information, mentally arranging the information, and then look for new patterns to see what is really going on in a system or in an organism. We must also be versatile, because the environment in which we are living is constantly changing. At the moment, there's even fiscal austerity because all the funds are driven into COVID research. In previous years, it was other research, AIDS, whatever. But all this, we need to get the funds to do our research. And there we must also understand that the success rate to get funding to do the work that we want to do, what we love to do, is sometimes below 10%. So therefore, we must diversify the income streams. We must also be able to accommodate the needs of governments. And we must successfully engage with the industry, because if we can meet their needs, they will fund. And that can be a little bit easier than from any government institution. We must also intellectually engage with the leaders in the field, because there is also where we get information from. They can assist, they can say, point out, oh, look, there you have a problem, look at this from a problem from that angle. And then we actually widen our scope and use every chance to present at national and, even more importantly, at international conferences, at international meetings, because this is where you meet the relevant people. This is where you can present yourself. This is important so that people can then recognize you as a researcher, and you can then polish your own presentations by getting more insight from and advice from other researchers in the field. We must stay optimistic, because, like I said, not all the experiments will work. Sometimes we have an idea and that is completely wrong. We need to understand how it works, and then we are struggling, and that can be frustrating. But in the end, we need to be at that level that we will understand and move forward and get the good understanding of the whole system. That so far to the background, coming now to the writing of a manuscript. And that starts even long time before the writing. It starts with having the good research done. And this needs do a thorough literature search first. You cannot start a research project or start writing something without knowing all the background, because then this will definitely lead to lack of novelty, and this in the end will lead to immediate rejection of your manuscript. So we need to formulate an important research question, put it down on paper, get it and absorb it again, and then do not work alone, collaborate. Get the input from other researchers in the field. Otherwise, we would just be boiling in the own broth and we will not move forward. Then the study needs to be planned very carefully so that we are really on top of a notch and move forward, and that we have all the novelty that is required. Then it's still before writing the paper, and there we need to understand the statistics, and that is starting before we write this and start with the study, because that means we need to understand how to actually create the proper study with the proper sample size that will then give us the relevant answer. If that is not the case, the study and the paper will be thrown out. So it's before and after finalizing the study, the stats must be done in a proper way. The presentation of the results must then be done neatly in an informative manner with figures and tables. the journal where you want to publish must be chosen very carefully. If you do not meet properly the scope of a journal, this will lead to immediate rejection. And recently I received a number of submissions to our journal Anthropologia, which is on male reproduction. These people, they wrote on female reproduction. Obviously, I had to reject immediately. So they wasted their time, they wasted my time. We must then also see, do we do clinical research or basic research? And there's even also the papers and journals available that specialize more on clinical research or more on basic research. So you must then choose carefully. On the other hand, do not fall into the trap to submit to all these journals that are really flooding the inbox with adverts, with these so-called predatory journals. They just want your money. They are not there to improve your output. They just want your money. So think carefully if that is possibly a predatory journal, and also be aware of possible IP, intellectual property, and patenting. Because once you have written an abstract and published it, spoken about anything at the conference, then the patent is out of the question. Further, once we start writing, that should tell a story with a beginning, a middle part where you really come to the nitty-gritty, and then a short take-home message where people say, aha, now I learned something. It must be written with good scientific writing, and it must be clarity, it must be brevity, and it must be logic. We should then use simple language, observe the rules of good grammar, spelling, punctuation, and linguistic style. Because if the reviewer does not understand what you are writing there and has difficulties to read and understand, then he or she will immediately throw it out. So write it in a way that it is easy to understand and that people can easily read it. And coming now to one very important part, plagiarism. Plagiarized manuscripts will be rejected immediately. And there we must understand that plagiarism is actually a criminal offense. That is really complete misconduct from a scientific way. Like I indicated before, the manuscript should be written in good scientific English, because even if it is poorly written, it will be rejected immediately, or it will then lead to major revisions, so that the publication will be delayed very much. But on the other hand, even like me, my mother tongue is not English. I had to learn it. So all of us have to learn the proper way how to express ourselves in English. So this must be learned. It is not a given by birth, and we must then put the relevant effort in it. Then once we have chosen a journal, we must stick to the format, because each and every journal has its specific format, how to write up the manuscript, how to cite, how to present the references. If that is not the case, that you do not follow these instructions, then this can lead to immediate rejection. But what do I mean with a journal style? There's general style, how to go about it. There's the manuscript submission. When they want the copyright transfer agreement, the format with a specific title page, how that should be constructed, the summary or the abstract, how that should be written, how many, sorry, how many words that must have, how it, the style of it, then the introduction, materials and methods, results, discussion and acknowledgements, and even the length. In many journals, they prescribe how many words you must have or should not exceed. Even the units for what you have to use, it's milliliter or the deciliters, abbreviations, nomenclature, and the style of references. All this is prescribed, and we should adhere to these rules. But the big problem is that the pressure on scientists is increasing on an annual basis. This is just for +1 with the numbers of publications here, and the more publications are out there, the pressure is on publish good quality to get it accepted. It must be faster, and in the end, that might then lead to sloppy research, poor statistics, and plagiarism. And this is what we see here in different regions of the world, in Asia, and I would think that this might be due to language issues. Here, over 25% of editors found that manuscripts here were plagiarized. In Europe or in North America, that these figures look a bit different. But what can be plagiarized? There is even whole articles with different authors. There's just copy paste and just put in a different author names. This is what we have seen already. The entire article with the same authors, just the duplicate submission to increase the number of papers that one scientist has. This is basically academic misconduct. Or what is seen more often, that sections of a paper are just simply copied. Materials and methods. And this is a very difficult part, but we should still focus on that, because it is really difficult to reinvent the wheel and to describe a certain standard method all the time, again and again. So we sit definitely with problems, but we should not forget about it and not try to paraphrase. This slide, this is from a publication that we had in 2019, where we analyzed the similarity indices before 2000 and after 2000. And I think that just actually demonstrates the issue, the mounting pressure on scientists. In previous years, there was less publications. It was easier to publish, so there's less plagiarism. In more recent years, this pressure was significantly increasing, and thereby increasing to more similarity and more plagiarism in these papers. But this, again, plagiarism amounts to intellectual and academic dishonesty. And common causes they might or are is all pervasive publish or perish mantra. But we must publish, we must publish, we must publish. Yeah, how if we don't have the money to publish? So all this in the end causes a problem there. Personal ambitions of poorly educated individuals, vanity, financial pressure, and even here personal pressure that people want to have a promotion. And then on the other hand, the worst forms of plagiarism is falsification of obtained data. This is something you must not do at all. Or the fabrication of data, that's just doing something on the paper and has no basis. Even the plagiarism of ideas and words. And this is some examples that I want to show you here. That was from a paper. All these highlighted areas were copied from another source. This is a similarity index of the whole paper of 52%, totally unacceptable. If we go further here, this looks a bit better, but you can still see here that is copied and pasted and slightly revised and paraphrased. The software is available, and many journals, including my own journal, we went onto that. We do a routine check for each and every submitted manuscript for plagiarism. Here you see a originality report from Turnitin with 39%, which is definitely much too high. It is copied 10% out of this paper, 3% out of this other paper here. On the other right-hand side here, a manuscript with a good similarity index of 8%. It should at least be less than 25%, better less than 15%. We must avoid plagiarism at all credit and at all times. So therefore, we must give credit to use other person's ideas, opinions, and theories. And even, like I say here, the ideas, if it's coming from somebody else, it's not your own idea, you must recognize. Use quotations from other person's spoken or written word. Paraphrase other person's spoken or written word. Use facts, statistics, figures, drawings, but then refer to it. Do not just give the impression it is your own if you are taking it from some way. And if you get some way the information, do not just quote an article where you read something, because that can be wrong. And I have seen it many times that people quoted an article, I went back and saw that is not even standing in there. So this is a major mistake that many people are doing. Rather go back and look for the source of information and verify each and every paper that you want to cite in your article. Publications are important for scientists, yes, because the publications, they are the measures for productivity of a scientist and a reputation. The more publications a scientist has, the higher is the reputation. The higher the impact of a scientist is, the higher is the reputation. And even the higher the impact factor of a journal is the scientist can publish in, that is a measure of reputation. But with this impact factor, that is also problems, because employers, funders, they can misuse this information and then put the impact on promotions, on granting of funds, of selection of job applications, and so on. So where we have to look very carefully, what does this specific measure actually telling us? Is it the reputation of a scientist, or is it the reputation of a journal? The impact factor of a journal is more the journal, not the scientist. And there are also then other measures that can be taken into consideration, like the H index, the RG score, or even the number of publications. But if you look at the number of publication, then you have to look at the quality of the journals. So if we then collaborate, we must mention all the collaborators, even either in the list of authors or in the acknowledgements. It is not that this one single scientist is doing something and I am the one. No ways. It is always a collaboration. Nowadays, the one single scientist doing something in the corner of a laboratory, it's something of a past long time ago. What does qualify for authorship? Contribution of experimental design, intellectual contribution, writing, but it does not just providing the fund, technical assistance, some discussions, which is then not really defined, proofreading, or some other assistance. So all these, they should then be acknowledged in the acknowledgements. But how does it then further go? If you wrote up your manuscript, you want to submit it to the journal, it goes to the editor. The editor then checks if it meets the criteria, is complete. If that is not the case, it will be rejected immediately. Otherwise, it goes to independent experts whom you do not know. But it depends on the journal. It's mostly 2 referees or even more. Some journals go up to 4 or 5 referees. Then the reports come back to the editor. The editor screens, weighs it up, makes a decision, and then it's either accept without further revision, which is really very rarely the case, or the manuscript needs then revision. It's minor or major, or the manuscript is rejected, but they said, okay, if you do this and this and that, you can resubmit, or then the manuscript is completely rejected. You must also be aware that the rejection rate of top journals is about 10%. Acceptance rate 10%, rejection rate about 90%. And this is just a summary of some guidelines for successful publication of papers, which I would like to make available to the audience later on, that can be sent out, that asking yourself whether the time is right, whether you have conclusions prepared properly, decide who will be co-authors. If you, that is or can be a contentious problem, because if you leave out important people who contributed to your paper, you will never get assistance from people again. So if you don't want to burn bridges, then you think about this very carefully. But at this stage, I don't want to read through this all again. But like I said, I will make all this available later on. And with this, publication is not running a gauntlet. It should be fun. It should be successfully done. And if you follow all these rules, then this will definitely be a success, and you will have your paper published in a good journal. And with this, I would like to thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Professor Henkel. It was a really interesting lecture, and you touched on a very important points, actually. We have a couple of questions, but I think we'll wait for the discussion period of time at the end of this seminar.
Yeah.
Many thanks, Professor. It's my pleasure to introduce my colleague and friend, Dr. Sahrab Rasool. She's graduated from College of Medicine, Baghdad University in 1987. And currently she is a senior lecturer in anatomy at the University of Western Cape's Department of Biomedical Sciences.
مجهولي عن طريقة كتابة
Dr. Sahrab
البحوث.
Rasool has the MPCHP BEd, PhD, and MSc. She has an interest in researches, and the researches including medical anatomy, clinical anatomy, and molecular oncology. Now, it's my pleasure to invite Dr. Sahar. Dr. Sahar, the mic is yours. Thank you. You are muted, Sahar, and we can see you. Yeah.
Dear audience, thank you for the opportunity to speak. As Dr. Mohammed has introduced me, so I always used to start my presentation by saying that I cut dead people to make a living. So I'm an anatomist, and in between that time, I usually do research on molecular oncology. I'll try to summarize a few points and elaborate on the points that Prof. Hinkle has already mentioned with regard to literature review. So if we want to define literature review is a critical recap or synopsis on research relevant to a particular topic. No one would take you seriously if you don't demonstrate your knowledge in a particular field or in that particular field that you want to publish in. Of course, the literature review can be written as standalone paper. So you are writing a review article, what's known as a review article. And most of the researchers, they do research in the lab, but the results of experimentation that fail sometimes takes time. So in between that, we write literature reviews. Literature review also can be a section of a thesis that provide the theoretical framework for a research study. Why do research and writing start with a literature review? So in addition of giving a critical overview of an existing knowledge about what's already known in the field, you get to know how those researchers approach that field or that particular topic. So you get an idea about the methodology used in a particular topic. And also you find out what are the missing gaps. So for example, you started reading on breast cancer and you discover that molecular research in Africa or in South Africa is not very extensive. So you decide that this is your gap or your niche, which you can do research in and you can produce original work. And usually it's you can find gap with regard to the country, you can find gap with regard of the age of the sample. There are a lot of gaps that we can find and we can develop while we are browsing the literature. So there are a lot of papers that are published in a particular field, and it is very hard to publish nowadays. If you just browse how much is written on corona, there is now 70,000 papers written so far and 15,000 papers on the symptoms alone. So, but you still can develop your literature review because it's the aim of any every academic review is to stand on the shoulder of giants, and that is how you can see further. And you can see that I put to stand on the shoulder of giants between two inverted commas because I'm quoting somebody else. And that is something very important we will discuss later. We use quotation when we are using thoughts or statements or ideas that are not ours. How to start a literature review? First of all, you have to decide on the topic. The topic should be interesting and tackling an important aspect of the particular field, and it should be a well-defined issue. Don't select a vague topic. The second thing that you're going to do is to conduct literature search on that topic. You can use the books or you can use the journals. The journals are very much more preferred nowadays because they are peer-reviewed. And the peer review is very extensive. That's why most of the people prefer reverting to journals. But that doesn't exclude the books and any basic studies that we can obtain from these references. You need to search your topic in the right scholarly database. Like PubMed, we the doctor/scientist, we use PubMed, Science Direct, and Google Scholar. So you use certain keywords that you decide on. And after that, there is something called Boolean Operators, which are 3 words and, or, and a wildcard. So you can use these to separate between your, with capital letters, uppercase letters, and it separates between your search words, the keywords that you have already selected. And you can do 2 things. You can either widen your search, make it broader, or you can make it more specific, and we'll talk about that. So Science Direct is another way of searching, and for one reason that I don't know this, when you put the same, you put the same keywords, but you get different results. So each one of these provide you with different topics or different research articles. One of the main research engines is Google Scholar, and Google Scholar is very superior, in my case, to the others because it shows you how many times the research is cited. So you always go to these papers which are really highly cited because it means that somebody else have read that paper and he finds something very interesting regarding your field or your topic. So when you see an article that is cited by too many people, you have to get that article, but you have to also remember that newly published articles does not have that much of a citation. So it doesn't negate the significance of an article that's not too much cited. It could be very much new. Okay, then you can redefine your topic. As I said, you can tweak your words, your keywords in the search to make the subject broader or narrower. So if you type breast cancer in the search engine, you get, I did that yesterday, you get 430,000 papers almost. If you type breast cancer and molecular markers, you'll go to 57,000. If you type a triple negative breast cancer, that is reduced to 15,000. And if you type a triple negative breast cancer and molecular markers, you end up with 5,000. So that is how you add your research keywords, and you add the Boolean operator and then your search will be more defined. Sometimes you don't need the search to be more defined. You need the search to be wider. And I will give an example, maybe a funny example. Suppose you want to study the sexual behavior of penguins in South Africa. So you come to the operator and you write sexual behaviors and you write penguins and you write South Africa and you press the search engine and you don't get papers, or you get 1 or 2. So the way to go around that is to make the topic broader. So you type sexual behavior of animals or birds, penguins being a bird. So, and then you will get more topics about the subject and you start broader and then you become more specific. So the fact that there isn't many references about a particular topic doesn't mean that you cannot write a review about it. After you find your papers, or you identified your papers, you have to get the PDF files of these papers. So the papers either available online for free. Now there are a lot of papers that is relative to SARS-CoV that are available online. They are free articles. You can buy some articles if you have money. And maybe the very important articles. If you find an article that you think is very significant to your study, you can pay the relevant fee and get the article. The university library usually have some subscriptions to certain journals, and then you can get the articles through the library of the university. And the other way is to write. To the author in order to get these papers. After getting your papers or your PDFs, you have to use you have to put your referencing into a referencing software. There are a lot of referencing software, and some people prefer one on the other. I use EndNote because I came to South Africa and I saw my colleagues using EndNotes, so I got used to EndNotes. People in UWC, they use RefWorks, but I don't think they are very much, the one is more superior to the other. There are around 10 top reference engines which you can either drag your citations from online, from the internet, or using keywords, and this will show you the abstract of the papers that have been brought from the internet. And also you can attach your PDFs to this particular topic. So if you have a particular paper and you got the PDF, you can attach the PDF to this particular title of a paper, and then you get your digital library constructed. Now we come to the most important idea and what Prof. Hinkle have stressed about. Read these papers once, twice, maybe thrice, to develop an idea of what is going what are the findings, what are the study parameters. And I suggest that the moment you read the paper, and since English is not our language, you put it down, you write down your summary of that paper. So we're going to go into how we do that and how we go about writing the summary for the papers. So this is a very biphasic process. You are now selecting the papers that you've read, and after selecting the papers that you've read, you need to develop a rough idea like about the themes and the sub-themes, and I will give an example of that. And then you need to also later on, after identifying the themes and the sub-themes, you identify the connection between these papers. So you need to identify the connection, and that is very important. That is what critical thinking is about, because what you are aiming to produce is a critical recap. You are not going to do a shop list for the papers that you have read. You have to intellectually analyze and synthesize the information that is there in the paper. So I do an Excel matrix. Most of the people like me do an Excel matrix. Suppose I want to write a paper on SARS-CoV, as I said, COVID-2. So as I said, there is now around 44,000 papers published. I will select the ones that is useful for my research. And I would try to decide as an anatomist that my theme will be the systems. So it will be respiratory, cardiac, neurological, and GIT. And then I might develop sub-themes like upper respiratory, lower respiratory. And then I put the year, the title, the author, journals, and then a summary of the article. I'm putting that one. It's about GIT symptoms. So you write a summary of the article in your own words. So you are not copying and pasting from the article. As many people would do, there are certain reference engines that allow you to copy and paste. You shouldn't copy and paste. You should summarize the article in your own words, and then you can add many other columns. I mean, my slide is not enough for introducing other columns like the gap in the knowledge, the methodology that is used in addition to the summary. So, and then the research focus of that paper, and maybe you can, this is actually your record, you can shift this information up and down. Maybe you decide one day that it's not okay to write about the symptoms. Too many people wrote about the symptoms. You want to write about PCR and its validity. So you reorganize and the information that you got. And now I come to the most important slide in my presentation. And now you can see that I'm directing you to the slide. Sorry, Prof. Hinkle, I'm going to say a few Arabic words that you might not be able to understand. I'm talking to my Iraqi colleagues. There is a very major difference. There is a very major difference between writing in Arabic and writing in English. In English, it's not enough to master the language and to master the grammar. You have to master the English style of writing. The difference between, we had a lot of students from Libyan students who graduated with masters and PhD, and we struggled a lot with their writings. Because the Arabic writing has that sudden shift in ideas. So in a paragraph, there will be many ideas that are dished in one paragraph. In English, this is not accepted. When you write, you have one idea per paragraph. So you decide on a controlling idea or a powering sentence, which you open your paragraph with, and that is your title of the paragraph. Then in the next 3 or 4 sentences, you are going to explain that controlling idea. And then you complete the paragraph by a critical evaluation of what you have written above. So that is, you conclude your paragraph and you wrap it to the next paragraph. I'll give an example, a simple example. So don't quote me on that. So suppose you start your paragraph by saying the incidence of corona varies globally. The person who reads that will understand that you, in this paragraph, you are going to talk about the incidence, the variation of incidence of COVID, of SARS-CoV-2 globally. You don't talk about any other idea. And then at the end, you have to introduce your critical analysis. For example, like saying, after mentioning the studies, you can say those most of these studies has reported that there are more sensitive means for detection or more sensitive means for eliminating false positive results. And then the person will understand that in your next paragraph, you might be talking about the more sensitive means because that was your concluding sentence. So this is a simple way. Usually, even if you give your writing to an editor, the editor can only edit that much. So he can edit a word or two. He cannot edit a paragraph which has too many ideas and it looks like a scrambled egg. So your paragraph needs to be clear and precise. And it contains one idea. You think of the controlling sentence, you think of the paragraphs that you are going to write and how you structure them. You can see that guy, he is moving between, so he's putting these ideas on a board and he is moving the ideas in a way to construct, as Prof. Hinkle said, a well-told story. So those people who publish in Nature and publish in these very high impact journals, they are good storytellers. So good storytellers can have their papers published in high impact journals. There are two key elements also to a paragraph. There is the descriptive reporting element that comes in the body of the text. We already established that there is an opening sentence. And then at the end, there is the interpretive or the critical analysis of the paragraph. And I am a representative of education, so I like to put that triangle. For those who work in education, they know that triangle, it's comes from a guy called Bloom, and he used action verbs to indicate the level of cognition and the level of critical thinking. So when you write or you list experiments or other people research, you are in the base of that triangle. And when you move to synthesis and analysis, you are actually moving up with your level of creation. So you need to be at the top level if you want to publish a paper that is accepted in a journal. You cannot be at the bottom, you have to go on the top. I'll just show you an example of how to write a paper. So this is a paper that is very much clinical. The clinical features of COVID-19 are varied, ranging from such and such. So he writes all the studies, and then at the end, he ends it up by his conclusion. So he gives the number of fatality, and that is how he concludes his paragraph. So in the next paragraph, you can see that he talks about the disease in other areas has been reported to have different fatalities. So he always used the sentence to link it to the next paragraph. So I selected these papers. The second one, this one is about SARS. So he's talking about coronavirus that uses ACE converted from ACE2, and that is present in the cell as a mode of cell entry. And then he mentions the organs that is involved, and he gives here a more clever way of interpretation, although it's not very grammatically solid. So he denote that the mechanism of entry to the other organs, or the mechanism of disease causation in organs other than the lung, is not as a result of direct invasion of the virus. So this is the way of writing a paper. You put an opening sentence, which is the controlling sentence or the title of the paragraph. In the middle or the body of the text, you explain that sentence, and at the end you put your interpretation, and you conclude and wrap it to the next paragraph. I think Prof. Hinkle touched also on paraphrasing and plagiarism. I think these two topics are very connected, and I kept on shifting between these slides because I found the notes on them is very similar. So we, the Arabs, we are not very good, because Arabic is our first language and English is our second language, not our mother tongue. We are not very good in paraphrasing. When I started academia, I used to read the books too often and use and borrow the sentences of the author when I explain to the students. This might be accepted in teaching, but it's not accepted in writing a paper. When you write a paper, you have to write a paper using your own words. So you cannot borrow the ideas of somebody else or sentences from somebody else, written by somebody else, and you attribute it to yourself. If you want to use somebody else's work, you have to use quotation, and you have to indicate that this is not yours. Quotation also, you cannot use it throughout the paper. You can use it once or twice in a paper. How to achieve a successful paraphrasing? You read the original source or the original article, and you become very familiar with the content. And then you note down the key concepts of the article, and you put it aside and you use your memory to write a summary. We already talked about the Excel file. So you introduce a summary, a good summary of what you have, of that paper, of what you have read. And then you check it against the original paper. If you find it very similar or still similar, you have to rephrase. You have to start from in a different point from the original. You change the sequence of ideas. You use synonyms, words that have the same meanings, different words but have the same meanings. Change the sentence structure. And then you break up long sentences into short ones, or you combine sentences. All these are methods to avoid plagiarism. So texts are not accepted as if they are plagiarized. And as Prof. Hinkle said, there is that Turnitin, and it's even now it's fitted into our student assignments. So when the students submit an assignment, the Turnitin will scan it, and it will tell you how many, what is the percentage of the part that is borrowed from others. You know, students also tend to plagiarize. It's easier for them. Like when we quote somebody, we have to, for example, yes, we can. Everybody knows that it's for Obama. So we put it into between quotation marks, and then we write the reference and the year. And this is an example of a quote. Now we can almost towards the final part of my presentation. I hope I'm not exceeding time. There are structures, the general structure of writing. You can start broad and go specific. Like, for example, you write on molecular biology, then you go back to the techniques, molecular techniques, and then you write about the PCR. You make the subject more specific as you go. And each writing should have an introduction, and then the ideas comes to the body. You have to have a critical recap. So there are other ways of structuring your writing. You can you can structure your literature review as 3 individual areas that are interrelated. Maybe you're writing about science and technology in one paper, and maybe the 3 areas can have a central part which is common to all the 3 areas. So you can start from the center and go out, or from writing about the 3 areas, and then you write a point or a paragraph that puts all these areas together. You can write it in a way, or as paragraphs that has equal weighing, and they come sequential one after the other, and all of them fits towards one particular major idea. So these are ways or types of writing that you can use if you are writing a paper. I suggest you start with the easiest one. That one in the middle is, I think it's a bit difficult for somebody who's just starting. When you do a structure, you do a basic structure and try to get your ideas in a row, and so that you get your work published. Final hint, and this is also was mentioned by Prof. Hinkle, before you start, you have to read about the format guideline of a particular journal. So when you send to a journal, you have to pay attention to the font, margin, spacing, title page, abstract, body text, citation, the way of citation. There are these softwares like EndNote usually can change the citation according to the journal that you are writing it. So it can automatically change your citation when you apply to another journal if you feed it with particular information. So this is something very important. And if your paper is not accepted in one journal and you want to submit it to another journal, you have also to rechange the paper according to the new rules of that particular journal. Finally, you can write your review, and then you review your writing, and please consider any feedback is a chance of improvement. Don't despair. I mean, I have a paper that's been cited now for 125 times about corona, the clinical symptoms of corona, and the molecular structure of coronavirus, and it wasn't cited at the beginning. Attention, because it's considered as a baseline for comparison. So, and we got that paper rejected several times. Then we had to do a lot of alteration, once and twice and thrice, until it got accepted. But that's the way. You have to accept the criticism as a way of view it as a way of improving your writing, and not otherwise. So there is nothing impossible, and you can succeed in publishing. Thank you. Here is the penguins at Simonstown So you can see that when you come to visit us in Cape Town.
Thank you, Sahrab. This is really interesting subject, and it was very informative and comprehensive. May I introduce the next speaker, Patricia Cox. Do you want to do that, Sahrab, please?
I can do that. Dr. Patricia Cox is a member of NHS from 2010 until present. She is an obstetric and gynecology trainee in Northwest Times region. She has her BSc in endocrinology, and then she did MBBS from King's College in London in 2010. She graduated in 2010 with MBBS, and she passed her MRCOG in 2017. She has published original articles in case reports and review articles in several journals like The Lancet, the Climacteric and BMJ case report, and clinical medicine. And she is a very interesting presenter. So she can start with her presentation. Patricia, it's yours.
You're muted, Patricia. Patricia, you are muted. Yeah.
I'm muted now. Sorry,
Yeah,
sorry about
we can
that.
hear you. Thank you.
Can you see the presentation okay? Yes?
Yes, now, yes, yeah.
Yes, okay. So much for the opportunity to talk. When I heard that I was presenting, I thought, goodness, I don't know what I could add for myself, but I guess just the practical aspects of how research and research methodology applies to everyday practice. And I personally have not taken time out of training to dedicate my time to research. However, I have managed to gain experience in research and publication. So if I can do it, anybody can do it. So the contents, I'll just quickly go through: audit, quality improvement, evidence-based medicine and critical appraisal, the types of medical research, study designs, grades of evidence, statistics, how one can organize a research project, and also how to look for opportunities to gain publication. So those of us practicing in the UK, we often are asked to participate in departmental projects. And the three main types of projects that we get asked to do are either audit, quality improvement, and research. And sometimes they're used interchangeably, but they mean different things. So an audit is assessing whether best practice is followed with the aim of improving the quality of care. So we evaluate how we are doing in our department against a predefined guideline, and we change practice, and then we repeat the audit cycle to make sure that the changes have happened and we're more in line with the guidance. A quality improvement project is like a small mini audit where we aim to improve the patient care. We make small changes and measurements, and we see whether that has changed the care provided. And lastly, research is actually creating new knowledge, and this will ultimately determine best practice and provides the foundation for determining the standards that we audit. So quality improvement projects are a model for improvement, and it asks three main questions. So the aim, what is trying to be accomplished? How will we know if this change is an improvement? And what changes can we make that will result in this improvement? And the project should be SMART. The acronym is specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time defined. So they present the QUIP in this kind of cycle. And an example would be, we see that diabetic patients on the ward have got very poorly controlled blood sugars. So we see, are they eating the right things? So we give them some information to read we inform the staff, and then the next week we see whether their blood sugars have improved. If there's no changes, then maybe there's something else that we need to improve. So do we need to speak to the catering staff? Are they timing the blood sugar measurement at the right time? And so on and so forth. So you go around this cycle. The other thing is, you know, is it an audit or is it research? And the way that I think of it is, research is discovering the right thing to do. It's a new idea. And audit is ensuring that what we are doing is done right. So research is new knowledge. It's based on a hypothesis. It takes a long time to, and a large scale. It may involve a treatment or an experiment, and it always requires ethical approval. And the audit is, are we following best practice? We're measuring against standards. We use it in a local or a small or a regional population over a short time span. It never involves anything new, so no new treatments. So for that reason, it doesn't require ethical approval. Next is evidence-based medicine. So all of the medicine that we practice is based on evidence which has gone into guidelines, and these guidelines have involved critically appraising the evidence. And it's really important that when we are in practicing, that we look at, when we read a paper, we appraise the paper to see whether it's important enough to apply day to day. We can do this ourselves, or if you're more interested, there are different tools available for critical appraisal, such as the CASP, the Centre for Evidence-Based Medicine, and something that I'm used to as an obstetrics and gynecology registrar, so the Scottish Intercollegiate Guidelines Network. But just, you know, in day-to-day practice, some standard questions to ask, that I ask myself, that you may want to ask yourself when reading a paper, is: what is the question? What's the design? What were the outcome factors? Were there confounders? Was the right statistical method used? What were the results? And are the conclusions what the author expected, or are they different? And did they consider ethical issues? So I'll just briefly go through a brief overview of the different types of medical research that one can get involved in. So I like this table because it kind of just divides things into primary research and secondary research. So things like review articles, meta-analyses, these are secondary research, and they're very important, and I'll touch why later. And primary research, you know, basic research, which is kind of pure science, animal studies, cell studies, genetics. Clinical research, which is something that as practicing doctors we're more used to. So either experimental, so clinical studies, or observational studies, and also epidemiological research, so experimental, observational, cohort studies. So as I said, basic research is animal experiments, cell studies, biochemical things, and in a good paper, the procedure and design, you can have your own laboratory and repeat that yourself, and confounding factors should be controlled or reduced. Clinical research, as I said, is broadly divided into interventional or non-interventional. So experimental is interventional, such as clinical drug studies, where we compare a treatment in a patient population. This is always subject to legal and ethical requirements, and ideally it should be randomized or blinded. The other observational would be non-interventional therapeutic studies, secondary data analyses, case series, and single case analyses. And in these cases, the evaluation is often retrospective. Epidemiological research investigates the distribution and changes in frequency and causes for a disease. I'll touch on it a little bit later. They can include measuring the effect of an intervention, such as adding iodine into a diet to prevent congenital thyroid disease. Observational epidemiological studies can be further subdivided into cohort studies, case controls, cross-sectional studies, correlation studies. And cohort studies are very well suited for detecting causal connections between exposure and development of a disease. So study designs in medicine kind of overlaps with the different types of research that takes place. So you have basic studies, observational studies, interventional studies, economic evaluations, and systematic reviews and meta-analysis. I've touched on basic studies before, and descriptive observational studies, as I said, include case report, case series, and cross-sectional studies. These are the most simple research types because they don't contain a control group. And they're usually the starting point to developing a hypothesis later on for an interventional study. Cross-sectional studies can be either descriptive or prevalence. So a cross-sectional study will look at the point prevalence of a disease or the clinical outcome. We look at a particular moment in a particular population. And then they can be analytical. So cross-sectional studies can explain causal association between exposures and diseases. So for example, lung cancer in people who were exposed to asbestos and people who weren't exposed to asbestos. The case control study is conducted retrospectively, and that's what's happened in the past. So we have a patient with diabetes and a patient without diabetes, and they're compared in terms of the presence of their certain factors, so heart problems, so on. Diagnostic accuracy studies investigate the effect of a diagnostic method with a gold standard method, and they're similar to case control studies. And a cohort is a group of people who have been selected due to defining characteristics. And they're called follow-up studies, and they're prospective, and we think what will happen in the future. And these patients are followed up over time to assess exposure and outcome during the follow-up. Cohort studies can also be conducted retrospectively, and so as I gave that example of the asbestos exposure and lung cancer, they have reliable clinical evidence because they identify outcomes based on exposure. And briefly, experimental interventional studies, they compare the effect of treatments or intervention with a control in humans, and the placebo or the standard treatment can be used as the control. Ideally, they should be randomized, and they're usually conducted in 4 stages. So when trying to develop a new drug for marketing, it goes through 4 phases. So phase 1 is on healthy volunteers, and it's small number to decide that a drug treatment is safe, and they look at the pharmacokinetic and dynamic measurements of the drug. A phase 2 is conducted in a target population to determine the treatment effect of a drug or the treatment method, and the standard treatment is compared with a placebo. The phase 3 study is conducted on many patients to see whether the new drug is better or is better than the standard drug, and to show that a drug is not only safe and effective, but it's also better. And usually you want 2 good randomized control trials at this phase. And phase 4 clinical trials are post-marketing product surveillance studies, which are conducted in daily life, and it's once the drug has been approved, and they monitor any adverse effects and various additional indications of the new drug. So a good example, one that is very relevant to today, is the coronavirus virus vaccine. So due to the need to develop the COVID vaccination, it went through these 4 phases very quickly because they had a lot of money and a lot of need to develop. But usually getting through phase 1 to 4 takes many years. As I said before, randomized control trials produce the strongest evidence amongst the clinical trials because the patients are allocated to the intervention randomly. They're expensive, they're slow, but the randomization removes their allocation bias. They can be non-randomized controlled studies, especially if they can be done and they're inexpensive because they can be retrospective, but they are open to reporting and allocation bias. The other type of studies which are rarer are crossover studies, where a treatment, there are two groups of patients, and one has the treatment, then there is a washout period, and then they have the placebo, and it's compared to the other group who goes through the same thing in reverse. And the effect of the treatment is determined by the comparisons of both the self-control and the independent groups. And lastly, meta-analyses and systematic reviews. So once there have been several clinical studies, so randomized controlled trials and cohort studies in a clinical subject over time around the world, the results might be different, and there might be different properties, such as the sample size and the study design themselves. So a meta-analysis will combine the statistical results of different studies in a particular area, and it will provide a statistical answer, if you will, as to the effect of a treatment. Whereas a systematic review is one where the authors evaluate and interpret the evidence of all the studies conducted in the clinical area, and they interpret why the study, the value of each study, as opposed to a meta-analysis where you combine the statistical results. And all of these studies and all of these designs, they go into providing clinical guidance. And in obstetrics and gynecology, we use the SIGN model, where we have levels of evidence, and these in turn correlate to grades of recommendations in our day-to-day practice. So that's how the research relates to our day-to-day practice. So as you see, the best is a high quality meta-analysis, including reviews of randomized controlled trials, and the lowest level of evidence is expert opinion. And those correlate to the grades of recommendations which get put into clinical guidance and how we practice day to day. There is going to be a move in the future in terms of approaching the rating the quality of evidence to just looking at the study design themselves. So randomized trials are a high quality of evidence and observational studies are low. I'll cover quickly statistics. Just, you know, every research follows a hypothesis, and there are two competing hypotheses, the null hypothesis and the alternative hypothesis. And the null is basically that there is no difference to the outcome with the treatment. And the test is of significance are performed to see if this null hypothesis can be rejected. And significance levels that are reported in papers are usually less than 0.05 or 0.01. However, any research, any paper can be subject to errors. So a type 1 error is when we reject a null hypothesis when it in fact is true. So we believe that this treatment is effective, however, it is not. A type 2 error occurs when we decide that the null hypothesis, which is false. So we believe that this treatment is not effective, but actually it is. So type 2 errors can occur if the sample size is too small. And for any data, type 1 and type 2 errors are inversely related. So the smaller the risk of one error, the higher the risk of the other. But it's often believed that a type 1 error is more critical and more important to avoid than a type 2 error. So it's more critical that we don't reject a wrong null hypothesis. And the statistical tests that you'll see reported in papers, so all data is either normally distributed or non-normally distributed, and depending on that depends on the test that you apply to the paper. So automatically, if you're and this is why involving statisticians is important in research or when you're wanting to write a paper, because if you use the wrong statistical test, immediately your results are invalid. And although your paper might be, your paper will be wrongly reported. So in terms of training in the UK, if you want to organize a research project, you need time. So you need to apply for funding 12 months before work starts. You need to find a supervisor and collaboration. You need to find ethical approval. If you are in a training program, you may need to apply for time out of training. If you are in training, there are various academic training numbers that are available. The UK have local clinical research networks, and this is the first port of call to contact if you're interested in research, and contacting them, they can see what's available in your area. Also, any large study, high quality research project are put in the clinical research portfolio, and the link is here, which can be made available after the talk. And all of these studies require ethical and health research authority approval. Also, you might find that the hospital that you are working in are carrying out research that are included in the NIHR portfolio, and they may ask you if you want to recruit patients, help recruit patients. And to get involved in that, it's really essential that you do your online GCP certificate. So it's free. It provides evidence that you understand research principles. So we use it for our annual appraisal. And also, once you have that certificate, then you are free to collaborate in research locally. So lastly, other opportunities for publications. If you're applying for a training number or you're applying for a specific job and you want to show interest in the field, BMJ Open is a very good place to submit case reports. If you have performed an audit or a quality improvement project and you want to submit it to a conference, check whether the conference itself will publish the abstracts in a journal, because that is a citable publication that you can list on your CV. Look at academic and annual meetings and conferences relevant to your specialty. So Royal Colleges and their annual conferences and their relevant subspecialties. So from obstetrics and gynecology, there's, for example, the British Society of Urogynecology, the British Maternal Fetal Medicine Society. And for those conferences, if you submit a poster, then they will publish an abstract which you can cite. If you do perform a quality improvement project, this I suspect will be a hot topic in the future, and it's gaining traction in terms of clinical governance. There are various international quality improvement journals, BMJ Quality and Safety. It's worth seeing whether it's publishable. The other thing is just asking around. So once you've undertaken the GCP, asking the department if there is anything going on. If there might not be, but you never know if you don't ask. And lastly, editorial boards. You may work with somebody who is on an editorial board, and sometimes they contract out paper review articles that need to be written, and it's a good opportunity for undertake. Or you can contact them yourself and say, do you have any upcoming themes in issues that you need covering? Again, it just shows keenness, and if you establish that communication early, maybe something in the future might pop up. These are the references used in this presentation. I'd like to thank you all very much for listening. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Patricia. That was very interesting subject and really comprehensive presentation. Now, before we start the questions, I think Rafid has an announcement. Please, Rafid.
Yes, thank you, Mohammed. Thank you all for the excellent presentations. It's only less than half a minute. Please, I mean, we have 500 attendees earlier, but I only got feedback for about 300. So there are maybe people still missing and will write their names and emails. It is really very important for us, your feedback, and if you want certificate as well, please fill the feedback form on the link on the Google, which is I'm going to share again with you. And thank you again for joining us. And also just one quick thing, next Saturday will be our international conference for bariatric surgery. It is a good opportunity if you want to join us next Saturday. We will advertise for it tomorrow, hopefully, at the same time, but Saturday, not Friday, next week. Thank you all.
Thank you, Rafid.
It's yours now, Mohammed. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. We are starting the discussion, and hopefully it will take not more than 20 minutes. So, Sahar, if you have any questions, I have a couple of questions for Professor Henkel. I'll start with one and you carry on, Sahar. It's a question from Dr. Maniarama. How to avoid plagiarism in general subject, for example, definition, description of basic scientific topic?
It is very important that you read before. This is what I said, read, so that you can, in the end, come up with your, and this is what Dr. Rasul said, with your very specific niche of research. Because then you don't come into conflict with other colleagues, with other people who published already. So
just an example, please, Professor. Let's say if I define preterm labor as any delivery before the age of 24 weeks of gestation. Now, does this consider as plagiarism?
If it's the topic, no.
Okay.
It is the topic, if you maybe that you can then add ideas to the whole topic, when you expand on it. This is very important to expand the knowledge, but getting a research topic on fertilization process, that is not plagiarism.
Thank you, Professor. This is what I want to make clarify for our colleagues. Sahar, do you have a question?
No, I don't have a question.
So there is a question from the chat, actually. Dr. Zuhair Kamal. Does plagiarism include literature review and writing references?
Literature review, you must also not copy and paste. And
I think Sahar clarified this in her lecture, Professor. Yes.
Yeah, and one thing that people often misunderstand, copy from their own papers. They say that is not plagiarized. Yes, it is. It is self-plagiarism. And this is also not allowed.
Okay, thank you, Professor. So I think there's another question.
Something to add to that. This big problem of plagiarism, it can be really solved if somebody develops that habit and the capability of rewriting with your own words. So you have to restructure the sentences. And it's very easy if you are competent with English. If your English is not good, go and improve your English. So you move parts of the sentences, you move the ideas. For example, you can say such and such caliphs, they built Baghdad. And then you can say Baghdad was built by Al-Mansur, something like that. So you reverse the order of the sentence, you use different verbs, and you can rewrite what you want to write in a different way without the aim of the fear of that you are plagiarizing. So and
to summarize, Sahar, you have to read and read and read to digest this subject and put it in your own writing and your own...
and develop your own ideas. Don't copy the ideas of the others. If you copy the one idea or not, you have to quote them. You have to reference them and quote it.
This is what you just mentioned. It's not only the ideas, and to paraphrase the idea, if I would not mention where the idea is coming from, that will amount to plagiarism.
Okay.
So you have to be innovative in this.
And your
Yes,
idea. Yes.
you have to, if that idea is not coming from the writing person, but from somebody else, has to quote and refer to that person.
Thank you, Professor. Another question to Sahar, please, from
Yes.
Nada Muhammad. She said, how can we check the paper we want to buy online is relevant to the topic? Sometimes the title is not enough to know the details of the papers.
With the EndNote, you can read the abstract. The EndNote is it's a reference engine, and when you put the you type the search words, it pulls all the papers that is relevant to these search words from the internet, and then you can once they are on the in the PubMed, you can open each paper and read the abstract. If you read the abstract, I think it can give quite an idea of what is the work about, because the sample number will be mentioned, the methodology will be mentioned, and the conclusion. And then you can decide whether you want to buy this paper or not.
Thank you. So, Professor Henkel.
Yeah.
The first one is personal, actually. I was at one point the principal investigator and one of the researchers. At the beginning of the researches, we wanted to identify the sample size. Now, I refer them to the statistician who sort out the problem. But in your idea, what is the easiest way to choose the appropriate sample size for a research?
There's different ways you can do that. Number one, of course, you should go into the literature and see what the sample size that other people used. Number two, it is very important to know what kind of difference or reaction to some treatment one is expecting, what kind of improvement, because from an improvement you can calculate the sample size in the statistical program. If you don't have any information about that, then you are actually forced to do a pilot study.
Thank you.
Based on that, then you can do the calculation.
Yeah, thank you so much. Now, another question, actually. Again, it's my personal question. Now, basically, it's a bit probably vague, but if you give us an advice of what type of researches you advise to adopt in countries with the low income. Your personal experience, please, if you have guidelines for that.
You can start with systematic reviews. You can do meta-analyses, because there is where you can just screen the literature and find your gap of what you think is a gap in knowledge and elaborate on that. What people should focus more, what should have to be more elaborated. And even such systematic reviews, depending on the university, will then give some research income or importance for that individual researcher, so that he or she can then is in a better position to apply for other research funding. Or start with in collaboration. Go and reach out to other institutions who have funding available, and said, go approach the person. They said, I have this idea. What do you think about it? Can we do it in collaboration? So there is different ways.
Thank you. That's really helpful advice. And I hope my colleagues back home, they can get benefit out of this. It's really, it's very, very good advice.
Can I have some input regarding that? Yeah. In 2006, I came to Iraq, and I was part of a program called Iraqis Rebuilding Iraq. which was organized by the UN. And I worked in the Ministry of Science and Technology. And there were many authorities that gives money to the Iraqis, provided that you can write a decent research proposal. One of them was the Foundation for Science and Technology in Emirates, and she has grants that is really, it is addressing Iraq, so it is meant to be given to Iraqi researchers. So maybe one initiative would be, a future initiative would be teaching people how to write a good proposal to get money, because there are monies for Iraqis. We must just get it.
Thank you, Sahrab. This may be the next proposal for our next webinar. We have two people raising hands. If Noor allow them, please. Dr. Dara.
Yes, thank you so much. Assalamu alaikum. Thank you so much for the presenters, and thanks for the organizer that presented an informative and very nice topic. I'm Dr. Dara from Hawler Medical University at Erbil City in Iraq. Actually, I have just some suggestions regarding the future topics that the researchers needs to increase the level of the researching on submitting to grants. The first one, may I ask the Dr. Patricia, I think, if they have research, webinar regarding the factorial analysis and mixed method research studies. And I appreciate if one of the presenters, maybe Dr. Sahrab, can make an opportunity to make joint researches in the field of medicine. So it will be great for us if they can help us. And you know that will be easy for us to collect the data in our settings. So thank you so much for your time, and thanks again for the organizing such webinars. Thanks.
Thank you, Dara. At the UIMA, we are trying to connect people. So Sahrab, if you have any comment on that?
No, definitely there are always opportunities for collaboration. We would love to have other country samples, and maybe we can have our own, and then we can write a multinational study. It would be very international study. It would be very significant clinically. And even if we can collaborate regarding writing the paper and analysis of the data.
Great, thank you. And Dr. Ali Adil is rising. Dr. Ali?
Yeah, thank you very much, Dr. Ali Adil from the Unova College of Medicine. Thank you very much for this nice webinar. I have one.
Dr. Ali, you are muted.
Yeah, sorry. Yes, please. Dr. Ali Adil, Unova College of Medicine. I have one question about the citation. If I have one information which is cited in a previous research, if I go back to that previous research, I will find that he also cited this information for another research which is older than his research. Which research should I cite for this information? The recent one or the previous one? In this situation, I might go back to in 80s or even 70s, and I might get very old reference list, which may be rejected because. So what is the solution for this problem?
There is definitely, or there should then be additional information coming out of more recent papers. So if you then can phrase your text accordingly, that you actually fitting into the recent paper when you quote the recent paper and not the very old one.
Thank you, Professor. Sadiq Al-Fayyad, Dr. Sadiq Al-Fayyad raising hand. While waiting for Dr. Sadiq, Professor Henkel, there is a question in the chat. Do you advise to publish in a journal that offer post-publication peer review?
I would always go for peer review first, because that is higher quality.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much. Now, probably we have a couple of minutes. One last question, Prof. Henkel. As I know that you have involved in as an editor and many journals, do they, and I received some papers from European journals for appraisal, actually. Do you do plagiarism before sending for appraisal or while sending, or what's the process?
Say again?
So I usually receive some papers for appraising and to assess whether it's suitable for publication or not. Now, do you do the check for plagiarism before sending for external assessors?
Of course, they must be checked first.
Checks, yes.
Even for plagiarism, that is done by our editorial office. That's everything that is coming in is checked immediately. And if there is a high similarity index, then our assistant is emailing me the manuscript, and I go through that manuscript physically and say, what is going on? Then it's my decision. Is it rather in materials and methods, or must the authors then really do lots of work to reduce the similarity index?
Thank you so much.
Should be done first.
Oh, great. Thank you so much. Thank you, Professor. Now, if there's no questions, I think we're, yeah. So I think we are coming to the end of our webinar. I would like to thank our speakers, Professor Henkel, Dr. Abdurasul, and Dr. Cox for their efforts and very interesting presentations. And I hope we'll arrange similar things as a workshop in the future in the field of publishing and researching. Many thanks for everybody. Many thanks for attendance, and thank you for Noor for the support from the technical side. And many thanks of everybody. Thank you so much.
شكرا جزيلا محمد. Thank you, Professor Henkel. Thank you, Dr. Sahrab. Thank you, Dr. Patricia and Mohammed. And thank you for all the people joining us. We are very sorry that we reached our capacity today for 500, but still live streaming. So I hope that you haven't missed anything, and the video will be available as well. We will meet you again next Saturday for the bariatric surgery. I wish you all a very nice weekend. I hope the weather permits, and thank you all for joining us today. Good night.
Good night.
Thank you. Good night.
Many thanks. Thank you.
Night.